Hi, my name is Jessie Fairbanks, and I am a features programmer with Doc NYC. I'm very pleased to welcome you to a special Q&A with director Jennifer Maytorena Taylor, and also main subject Stacie Griffin, to talk about their film For the Love of Rutland. Thank you both so much for taking the time. We're so delighted to have you both here. Stacie, I am sure that the entire audience has many questions for you, but Jennifer, I'd like to start with you. Thank you so much for making such an incredible film that looks at inequity, industrial towns that are being left behind, addiction and immigration, among many other hot topic issues. This is a heavy lift of a film. You have so much that you're trying to balance. What drove you to make a film that deals with so many of these issues that are facing American societies?
Well, Jessie, thank you. And I just want to also quickly thank you and Doc NYC for programming our film and for everyone who watches it. I was really driven to make this film because I think we don't live single issue lives. I think we live lives that are very complex and where it's really difficult to take one issue out of someone's life circumstance and say their circumstance is only due to one thing. And I think in a small community like Rutland, Vermont, you have the opportunity to see how these multiple intersecting facets of the way that we live our lives as a society influence people's lives. So it was really a desire to tell a very holistic story about where we are right now as a nation, and also to give, to honor folks like Stacie, who I think often are not in our landscapes of representation and absolutely deserve to be, as anyone who's seen the film knows what a utterly magnificent person Stacie is. And we should see those stories.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. It really is, like, it's fascinating. And I mentioned I've watched the film as you've been working on it over the past, year plus. And you've really cohesed this into what is essentially three narratives. There's a lot of side stories as well, but, we have the story of Rutland. It's its own character. It's this, community that people care deeply about. Stacy and Lisa talk about that, as did the former mayor, Chris Loris. This is a place that people feel really strongly about, struggling to continue the survival of the town. We have Stacie Griffin, who is fighting for her family and her sobriety, and who gets involved in civic engagement. And Stacie, you're just this bright light throughout the film. But then we have the third story, which is really the community. So we have the town, but then we also have the community. And this is where the mayor, the migrants, those who run the welcome committee all factor in. So you kind of have these three narrative strands that you're balancing. Can you talk to us about how you identified that? Am I accurately projecting that onto you, and how you put together the narrative structure of a film that deals with so many topics?
Yeah, I think actually that's a perfectly perfect encapsulation. I lived in Rutland myself for a good part of my childhood. I'm from Los Angeles originally, as is my entire family, Los Angeles and also northern Mexico, but we moved to Rutland when I was a kid. And so I think growing up there, I had a really deep sense of how complex a small community could be. And I think you're right, Rutland has its own character, as do so many towns, and often it beats up on itself. But at the same time, as you can see from the different folks in the film who have really different ideological perspectives, they all love it. Everybody in their way loves their community. So I wanted to pay attention to that. And I also wanted to follow the story of how the possible introduction of Syrian refugees into the town was going to kind of map onto how polarized we've become as a people. But underneath that, what's most important to me is, again, the story of someone like Stacie and folks in communities where I think we need to do a much better job of listening and making space, and also including everybody in the civic life of a community. So the issues of class in particular and economic disparities really, really were important to me in making the film. I didn't want to make it just a two-sided pro-refugee, anti-refugee story, because that would be incredibly boring and it wouldn't teach us anything. So when we were editing the film, we really tried to find a way, and it was very difficult to keep all these threads alive. And of course, it went through multiple iterations. But we actually went with a color-coded editing system with cards to figure out how we were sort of distributing the different story threads to make sure that they were all staying current throughout the film. And I think your analysis of it is very good. That's exactly what we tasked ourselves with doing as we edited.
Well, you did an excellent job. It does feel like for the viewer that we get to see both sides of the story, and we get to see very interesting arcs of the former mayor and for Stacy. So Stacy, I'd love to ask you just as a starting question, what did you think when Jennifer approached you and said that she was making a film? And I don't know if this was part of your first conversation or if this developed later, but when you realized that you were really going to be a major storyline, what did you think about that?
Well, it took a minute. It took a couple of years to really open up during filming, and I mean, I opened my home, I opened my family, I opened my thoughts. I mean, just every aspect of my life to the film. And I have to say that I'm very grateful that I did. Jennifer and I had met in Exeter Street Park. It had opened up very recently when Jennifer and another mutual friend of ours happened to be there talking. And I had went over to clean the park, get ready for the kids to get out of school. And we just had a few hour conversation, and the rest is history. And here we are today.
Yeah, it's and it is incredible, Stacy, and I just want to thank you for being so open and so brave. I mean, there's an opening shot with you and with your son where you even say to Tyler, like, this is real, like, let's show our life as it is, and let's use this opportunity to really share. The struggle is real to pay the bills. You have to steal from Peter to pay Paul, and you're fighting to keep your kids in school, and you're fighting to keep yourself and your husband on programs, and it's exhausting. You've come across as a superwoman. Where you get your energy and your ability to keep moving forward is it's inspirational.
Well, thank you. That means the world to hear. I truly believe that in making this film, I am the vision of hope, the voice hope, that living a productive, healthy life is possible no matter what background is. I strongly feel that even though I'm a first-generation welfare recipient, I broke that cycle. Nobody else broke that cycle but myself and my family. My husband and I just celebrated 11 years married. In June, we'll be together 18 years. And you don't hear that a lot in Rutland. It's a very beautiful thing. And nobody done that work but us. And that's why I strongly believe that this film happened, because it's hope. It's it's reality, it's truth. And yes, sometimes the truth can hurt, but you know what? Let's learn from it and move on. It shouldn't matter if you own your own home. It shouldn't matter if you make 6 figures a year. It shouldn't matter if you're a recovering addict or alcoholic, or it shouldn't matter any aspect of life. We all have a voice, and I believe that we all should be heard. And that was a big part in making film, was being heard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it is very important to be heard and to be seen. It's, there's a lot of discussion about inequity, but in terms of actually being able to show what inequity looks like on the day-to-day and what it is like for the families that are fighting for survival, and that, it's hard to plan when you're thinking about how do I pay this bill this week, and how do I make sure my kid doesn't get suspended from school again unjustly. And on top of all of that, though, Stacy, you do so much civic engagement. I mean, you become a little bit politicized in the film, but you've always been a part of your community and lending a helping hand, which I don't think a lot of people appreciate or even understand and realize that just because you're fighting for survival doesn't mean you care about any less about your community, and that you're not out there working to make it a better place. So I'd love to hear,
Exactly.
You go through talking about resources, you go through kind of a shift in the film of like, you're not really sure what you think about the incoming program for the Syrian immigrants that the mayor has set up, and you're just curious about it and you want to learn more. And then in the end, you're going and visiting them, and you are spending time with them and getting to know them as your neighbor, and you're speaking up in town halls. And so I'm just curious, what does the current civic political life of Stacie Griffin look like?
Well, I work a lot. I work 6 days a week right now. I work at a local convenience store right in neighborhood. So I'm still engaged in the community in that aspect. I'm able to connect a lot with my neighborhood and community, so I'm grateful for that. But I don't get to see family as much as I would like. I need to make some time for that. I just want to say, I strongly feel that in order for the system to change, and it can be Vermont, it can be anywhere, but I strongly feel in order for the system to change and change a direction where it's positive and where it's going to help families and not make us feel like we're stuck, I feel that people like myself need to be heard, need to be seen, need to be recognized. And I feel as strongly with the Syrian families, they need to be seen, they need to be heard. It's 2020 people, it's not the 1920s anymore, I mean, all lives matter, we are all equal. And it doesn't matter your profession, where you live, anything like that. Like I said earlier, what matters is we're human, we have a voice, and we should be being. And that's the way I can't stress enough.
Thank you, Stacie. And I think you're a great teacher in the film, and it's an important reminder. Our festival will be screening following the election, and we don't know what that will look like, but I think this message of it's important that the system isn't punitive, that we support one another, and that people are allowed to succeed and survive. It's something we have to fix as a nation, as a community.
I agree.
I have one final question for you.
And I think the film is a great start for that. I do believe that. I do believe that.
It's a great jumping off point for conversations that are critical. And yes, absolutely. My final question for you, Stacie, is when you saw the finished film, because this was a labor of love over several years, what did you think when you finally saw Jennifer's film and the way that everything got pulled together in the final edit?
Well, it was hard. Of course, I opened life, in every aspect of my life. But it's true, it's honest, it's real, it's reality, and it's the life I live. And I know I'm not alone. I know that there's people out there like myself. So if I can just be a shimmer of hope, a conversation starter, and make a difference in one life, mission accomplished.
I think that you've done that, Stacie. So thank you so much for your candor and your bravery. I think, again, we're all inspired by you, and I wish you the best of luck. Jennifer, one last question for you before we're out of time. If you could just give the audience an update on how the former mayor, Chris Loris, is doing, and perhaps how Lisa Ryan, the community activist, is doing.
Yeah, so the former mayor, Christopher Loris, as we saw at the end of the film, was working for his family, and he now, I believe, is involved in some policy level work up in the state capitol in Vermont. I believe it has something to do with policy analysis. And I just want to acknowledge that Chris had a terrible tragedy befall his family that really affected the whole Rutland community. A few months after we finished filming, his son, who had been struggling both with substance abuse and with mental illness issues, was involved in a shooting in which both he and his cousin were killed. And this affected everybody in the town because the family also included Dave Allaire, who's the current mayor of Rutland. Everybody in this very small town is really connected. So it was a horrible incident, and I think it illustrated again the gravity of how so many issues are affecting people in every single community in the country. But I think also the community in Rutland really came together around Chris and his family and showed people a lot of compassion and love. So it was a terrible, terrible incident that also underscored that folks, even despite their differences, do try to work together. So that's Chris's story. Lisa Ryan, who, as we see in the film, becomes elected to the city's Board of Aldermen, I know has become very, very active in organizing with Black Lives Matter and with Rutland's NAACP chapter. And I believe she's going on to more kind of political life and endeavor. And I think she's actually being seen as kind of a rising star in Vermont politics, which, as you can tell from her forcefulness and clarity in the film, would be fantastic for the state.
Thank you for those updates. And I think every single viewer for Doc NYC sends Chris and his family our condolences and our well wishes. And there is so much to unpack here that we haven't had time to discuss, especially about addiction, about how it is a daily struggle and there are so few resources available, and that these individuals need to be supported and not vilified. There's so much to unpack about immigration. Stacie, you say in the film you can't imagine packing up your family and having to flee because you're afraid for your lives, and that's an important topic. And I'm sorry that we don't have time to do all of these really critical subjects justice, but thank you for making the film. And like you said, Stacie, hopefully it starts a conversation.
Thank you, Jessie. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Yeah, so everyone at home, please put your hands together for the incredible director, Jennifer Maytorena Taylor. I hope I am hitting that correctly, Jennifer. And for Stacie Griffin, thank you so much for watching The Love of Rutland. And please tell your friends about this film and help spread the word.